So after a failed attempt later of trying to record this video after doing it earlier, and this is happening at night. So hello everyone, my name is Mikhail. Welcome back to Mikhail's Show, where we review and react to TV shows, live actions, cartoons, movies, books that matter if I'm requested. And if you all have any suggestions to what we should be reacting to next, leave in the comment section down below. And if I see more things repeated more and more, then there will be a poll that will be up, and that will determine what we will be reacting and reviewing next. So without further ado, let's get this video started. So in today's video, we're going to be reacting and reviewing Romeo Chronicles, Romeo of the Blue Mist, and this is by Amy Kim Kabisky herself, and with book 2 on the horizon, Kingdom of Water. Yeah, no, we're going to be diving deep into this second volume extremely soon. Yes, as this recording, I am reading and enjoying it. And if y'all spoil it for me, well, y'all gonna get bent. I'm lying, I'm joking. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. So, without further ado, let's dive in deep into volume 2 of Romeo Chronicles of the Blue Mist. So, here we go. So, our story begins on Earth in the middle of the fall. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. This review and book takes place in the middle of October, the spookiest month of the year and the best month where to get candy. We meet our first main protagonist named Tabitha, Simon, Tabby for short. Tabitha is a 15-year-old girl who is determined and wondering what became of her late father when she was little. We learn that her late father was studying a strange substance, living that was life and giving from a great tree that spread rather quickly, which the PSPR named it Ecosol. We later cut to a flashback to where we learn that the mist gave everlasting life. It wouldn't kill you, it kept you alive, but it never affected any humans. This later backfired to where the mist itself connected to the brain, which entered the body to 200 years old. Soon enough, this ended up becoming a biohazard, so the city itself ended up demanding the PSPR to shut its facility down and the program itself, which later ended up getting erased from the townsfolk and from the town itself, memories. As that same day as well, her mother ended up telling Tabitha that she is forbidden from entering these woods along with it. In the middle of her thoughts, this is soon later interrupted by a mysterious individual who is lurking through the woods, and she gives hide behind the tree. As she is hidden behind the tree, her cover is soon later blown by her pen that ended up jumping on the ground, and she almost ends up getting nearly destroyed. So as this awkwardness is happening, the mysterious individual ends up dropping a ring, which ends up becoming extremely important later on during this review, so keep that in mind as we continue. So the scene pans over to Tabitha's house. When she's entering their facility, her mother ends up telling her that she's extremely late and that her new partner named Daniel, which is going to be her husband and Tabitha's stepdad, she ends up revealing that she's extremely late and that she should have been home an hour ago, and that they're extremely late and that they need to go immediately. Need to leave the house ASAP. But when getting questioned on to wondering if Tabitha is extremely happy about the news of moving out of the town and starting over, Tabitha ends up telling her mother that it really doesn't really matter, because like, why would it matter to her, to where it's all about her and not her life, which the mother ended up stating. So the mother ends up getting very suspicious to saying that she refuses to live a haunted life, which is very questionable. And if you're wondering why is she acting this way and what was the conversation with the ghost lady, well, we don't know entirely just yet until mid-endgame, so you look out for that. So we cut to the very next day, and it is 5:12 a.m. in the morning, and Tabitha is soon waken up by the blue light that is on top of the hill, which the mysterious individual is there on Yggdrasil. So Tabitha, so at any hesitation, Tabitha is chased up to Yggdrasil, to the Blue Hill, and sure enough, she is soon sucked in through the portal that the ghost lady ends up dragging her into, and now she's basically permanently stuck there. So when getting asked as to how she got here, she has to explain to the individual that she ended up getting pulled in by a ghost, and she has no idea as to wondering how she can get out. But sadly enough, this is later interrupted by an individual named Lena, who ends up saying that the council is waiting for his report and that they need to hurry up because they are running on borrowed time, and I don't think that they're gonna wait any longer. So he happily agrees and he ends up pursuing to leave. But before he ends up leaving, he introduces himself as Philip, and Philip ends up telling Tabitha that there are guards outside the building that they're in, and she has to remain hidden for the time being until he can get her back home, because the key that he ended up using is no longer in service, so he has to go back to Sector and get a brand new one. So crazy enough, she happily flies and agrees to stay until he gets back. 2 hours later go by, and after dealing with the council, Philip ends up finally returning, and when he questions us to wondering why she's so spicked out, she tells him that she keeps seeing ghosts, and Philip ends up thinking that she's hallucinating by the thermosphere that she's in, which pretty much is in his world. Well, yeah, about that. Anywho, the very next day, or better, which 3 days later, Tabitha ends up waking up in a mysterious area which she's not familiar with, and she ends up asking questions as to where she's at. So Lena ends up telling Tabitha that she is in. Yes. The very next day, or better, 3 days later, after nearly dying to an arrow, yikes, Tabitha ends up finally waking up in an unknown area that she is unaware of. She ends up questioning this individual, wants to wondering where she's at. So Lena ends up answering her questions and ends up saying that she is pretty much in Siri, and that she is pretty much been asleep for the past 3 days. And Tabitha ends up learning that Philip ended up lying to Lena that she is Philip's cousin, and that she is pretty much from Feasty whatsoever. This ended up becoming extremely awkward, so Lena ends up leaving the room, and she ends up getting Philip, who is outside, to confirm that this is actually her cousin. So after a whole awkward of silence and awkward of what had happened, Tabitha ends up searching through the room, and she ends up finding a book from the bookshelf that has been read constantly, and boy oh boy, this is insanity. Magic monsters, gods, goddesses, priestess, demons, kings, and heroes are at an endless war between two worlds, Nikeda and Romea. Yeah, that does not raise any more red flags than it already is, because oh my goodness, this gets a whole lot worse. But before we could dive deep into the history of Romea, this is soon later cut short to where Lena ends up returning with Philip and saying that this is her cousin, and Tabitha is rather confused as to when did this happen and how is she his cousin. So when Philip ends up dismissing Lena, Philip ends up confirming and telling her the truth that her life is extremely in danger, and that if they find out that he ended up bringing an alien to Romea and find out that she's not from Earth whatsoever, not from their planet whatsoever, she's going to be executed and taken to the temple and ended up getting herself tossed. So he pretty much pleads with her and saying that she needs to continue this facade until they can go to Sector and getting a key and getting her back to Earth. Anywho's, so when Tabitha ends up questioning Philip about the temples and the Geist, he ends up dodging the question, but he is more focused on getting her back to Earth instead of, answering what she's looking for. So after a long conversation and heading straight to Sector, actually, no, correction, sorry. So after a long awkward of getting embarrassed, of finally, getting her journal read, we finally dive deep into the Romica and we learn a few things. So, before life on Sacred, Romia, there were only chaos. The first Romia was born from a falling star. Upon hitting our ground, the star split into 5 energies. Yep, furthermore, these are the gods that are here. Firstly, we have Siphon, the god of forest. Flexi, I hope I'm saying it right. She's the goddess of fire. Maraphine, the goddess of water. Lathia, the god of wind. And Romia, goddess of stone and rain life. So as Tabitha dives deep into the Romia history, we learn a couple of things. The gods themselves ended up creating these creatures to bring balance into the universe themselves here and there. And they were pretty much equal to the gods when gifted these powers: fire, water, earth, wind, stone, and etc. But this soon later backfired to where the gods ended up learning that their creations themselves ended up spitting their blood across the land and ended up causing an unbalanced to the universe. Sure enough, this was later discovered and ended up getting everyone else bent and killed, and also getting cursed for those who rebelled against them on their own free intuition and will. After many eons later, the whole entire planet and universe was destroyed. Many eons later, the gods themselves had come to an agreement which they ended up creating balanced and harmony and harmless creatures and civilians alike, to where they would bring peace and keep it balanced the way that it's supposed to have been many years ago. And crazy enough, the creation that they had made, they are still out for revenge, and they want everyone else dead. And yeah, that is extremely dark, and it can't get any more darker than that. So anywho's, after slipping around, Philip ends up making his return, and when he discovers that when he discovers that Tabitha is uneasy, she ends up admitting that she ended up reading and discovering the history of Roma through the Romica book that he was reading. This ends up catching Philip's nerve, and he ends up getting upset about it. So when she questions if there is any geist around, Philip ends up admitting that there are more alike, but the individuals themselves don't want to admit it that they're geists at all. So on the way of flying to Sector, they end up flying past they end up going over through Netica themselves, and it was never meant to be this way when it was at its current state. This was soon later discovered to where the Nekada themselves ended up rebelling against everyone, and it kind of led to their own destruction, which ended up leading to its own state and demise. Yeah, no. it's in complete utter shambles after the threats that they had been telling these folks towards getting them put into place because they're apparently scared of the Geist. I'm sorry, excuse me? Yeah, okay, pal. So before the pair can officially split up, Tabitha ends up discovering that the ring is actually translated to which Philip is explaining, so he tells her that it's going to be important that she needs to keep it because it translates any language and writing within Romega itself. So we cut ahead to Sector, and it is magnificent and it is so beautiful inside. So as she sits on the fish bench, she meets another keeper named Peter. Peter is one of Philip's friends, and when trying to flirt with her, it's so cut to where he gets bumped on the head with a rock, and discovering that there is a Geist on the 4th floor that nobody seemed to have noticed or even give any thoughts to whatsoever. This later causes to a massive panic, which the whole entire civilians end up getting evacuated. As his evacuation, the two pairs end up reuniting, and this is where they end up sticking together. Furthermore, when Tabitha ends up questioning Philip if he ended up throwing that rock, he ends up admitting that yes, he ended up throwing the rock because Peter ends up taking things way too far, and as for the mysterious Geist that was up there, he doesn't know who that individual is, and he doesn't know what they're doing here. But soon, we end up encountering this Geist individual, and they end up meeting face to face. So in the middle of the battle, they end up confirming that they're not here for what they are looking for, but they end up saying that you're here because of the Arcana bombs that have been planted in Sector and that are about to be set off within a matter of seconds. When getting questioned about the Arcana bombs, if they had planted them, they end up admitting that no, they didn't plant them, but somebody else that was here that ended up planting the bombs themselves, which they don't know who they are and what they were tending to do, but judging from what has been told, yeah, they were going to end up getting every last individual bodied. Yeah, that is not a massive lawsuit in a crime. Anywho's, so nearly escaping death on its own, and the Sector nearly getting completely destroyed, we basically meet Rad. This is, General Rad. This is Philip's great-grandfather, who looks like a day over 12 years old. So, let's see here, where am I at now? Okay, so we cut our way back to the portal room, which is actually the actual name of it's called, to where they ended up saying their final goodbyes. But sadly enough, as Tabitha introduced the portal, for some strange reason, she can't go through the portal because apparently her hearing aids are going through it. She doesn't know exactly why, but that also gets answered much later. So let's continue on. So as our protagonist ends up making it out alive after escaping a nearly death, we cut back to Sector, which is completely in ruins after the Arcana bombs is, destroyed, and them blaming the crazy Geist that was flung around that stood for thousands of years. That's going to take more than thousands of years to get that building prepared. They are in complete utter disgust. So, as this is all happening, we meet the second main problem of this whole entire story, as Philip and Tabitha end up arriving at this facility in the aftermath of it all. This is Priestess Hydia and her quote-unquote assistant, Captain Julia. Hi, for today Anna here. So when getting questions about what's been going on, we learned a few things. Philip ends up confirming that the okay, I'm sorry, I lost my track here and there. Hold on. Okay, I'm gonna cover just a bit. Give a minute. Okay, so with that, and we're back. Found my place. So, as before, so Philip ends up discovering that the siren themselves are up to something, but he doesn't know what they're up to. Secondly, the person that he ended up fighting with is not other than Nia herself, who is his sister's trainee and keeper this whole entire time. He wasn't expecting her to fight her at all. Last but not least, as Nia is getting taken off, she ends up telling them that she is going to, quote unquote, free them for their tournament and this bond that they're free from this bond, and says that the Siron are the true gods, which is very questionable indeed, but we don't know exactly what she means by this, but we're gonna take her word for it and we're gonna continue on. Hopefully this gets answered. So later on, after a massive disaster, Tabitha ends up sticking out of the house, and while sticking out, a report ends up getting reported to Heidi herself, and she orders her guards to capture Tabitha and to imprison her and to question her before her execution. So, as this is all happening, we learned a few things from this. We end up learning that earlier, Priestess Hadia, knowing that Tabitha wasn't from Romeo whatsoever, that she is from Earth, and not from Feisty either, and she's not a Siri either. Secondly, when Linnea ends up figuring it out, when Linnea ends up questioning what's going on, Tabitha ends up confessing that she is not from Romeo at all, that she is an Earthling from Earth, and that Philip ended up lying to them all to protect her image from getting executed and from him from getting questioned about this. Thirdly, as Nydia and Tabitha ends up escaping, she ends up discovering that Tabitha is extremely slow, and that the plot that they end up using on her was actually also placed yet again. Be right back one more time. Okay, Aaron back. Sorry about that for cut again. So she ended up discovering that the Luna flower was the reasoning on to why she was so slow, and it drained nearly half of her energy, which she happily restores her energy with the field, which is a bonus. So much later, during the night yet again, after dealing with Heidi and Junior herself, the two protagonists ended up meeting the original creator of the keys and the code himself, which is I'll check again. Be right back one last time. This is the last time I'm cutting away. We're back one last time. Sorry about that. So when this is all happened, Senna ends up questioning as to what is going on and where is all this racket. So Red ends up explaining to Senna that they needed a portal open manually because Tabitha isn't from Romeo, she is from Earth. And when learning about this, Senna's revealing that ever since the morning incident due to Sector being destroyed by Nikaitic bombs, and its destructing of the aftermath is, well, in chaos, it pretty much turns out that the sector itself is officially closed, and that is in complete ruins. And due to the portals that are, decommissioned, whatever like that. But apparently, due to the portals that the Romeo had created and the barriers, they actually prevent any intruders from leaving their facility, so she is basically stuck there for the rest of her life. This angers Reed as to demanding her to bend the rules, but she quickly reminds him that she doesn't bend the law for nobody, and that will go against their rules whatsoever. So this is basically his own responsibility, and he can't do nothing about it. At least that's what they think when she ends up saying that no one can help her. Yeah, about that. So this is soon later interrupted by when Tabitha gets distracted by the ghost city once more, and when given chase, she ends up disappearing into the sky. So when Philip ends up questioning Unstreet if she's okay, well, she ends up telling Philip that, well, no, she's not, because number one, ever since that her, father had ended up, passing away, it still haunts her. Her mother wanted to move on from the past, and move on to the future. And when coming to Romania, things became more complicated, and she just couldn't move on because how things had ended up. Which I 100% agree, and I don't blame her for this. So they ended up making up, and Philip ends up admitting that the reason as to why he was hiding his feelings from her is because he was doing it as a keeper and as a friend, and he didn't know how to say goodbye because he wasn't ready for it, which is understandable. So as Philip ends up entering and going inside, we finally get to meet the ghost lady, and we finally get some answers as to what was truly going on, what was her purpose here, and why she couldn't enter the portals herself. So here we go. We end up learning that when she gets questioned about what had happened, why she can't enter, she ends up revealing that the reason as to why she brought her here is because, one, it is her destiny and determinants to guiding Tabitha, so that way she can at least find some answers to what she's looking for. So when she is done, she can automatically take Tabitha back to Earth. And when questioned about, how come she couldn't do it now, why it doesn't work for her, she does admitting that yes, she did bring her here, and that the portals themselves does in fact work for her, but not before, and that she is the only individual that can bring her back to Earth, and no matter what the civilians would do, she can automatically open up a portal herself without even giving a take. And before making her leave, she ends up telling Tabitha that before she gets her answers, she will finally make their meeting place at Fate's editing here at Fate's Divide. Also, forgot to answer is that when we come back to Earth, her mother ends up confirming that she had knew this entire time, and that her father didn't want the mother and Tabitha herself to discover her work into coming to Romania in doing so, but that later ended up backfiring. It kind of ended up causing his demise. So we cut back to Earth, and when Tabitha's mother ends up, questioning about what happened to her daughter, is she okay, is she alive, he tells her that yes, her daughter is in fact indeed alive, and furthermore, that she is basically stuck here and has to remain her lives on Earth. Well, correct, not on Earth, on Romania, the rest of her life. So she ends up giving her letter to her mother and saying that she will not give up, and to find her way home and end up, telling her to, have faith in her. Her mother ends up pleading to Tabitha to not become like her father and her, and not allow greed, fear, pride, and hatefulness as she lives on. We soon later cut to a flashback before the story ends up ending, is that her father ends up telling her that she needs to find Helver, who is the key of everything. And that is the conclusion of the Roma Chronicles, Roma of the Luminous. I want to thank you guys so much for being so patient with me and getting these reviews out as I see fit. Like I said, these synopses take time and patience. So yeah, I really pretty much took my time in doing this. So, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, if you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Big yellow button. Remember, spread love, be love, keep God first, and God bless you all.